Hello and welcome back to the Abundant Living University. I'm your host, Glenn Ullman. This morning I really just want to talk about how we live our lives. So this is about creating more abundance and living. So I went out to get my paper this morning after the markets got drubbed yesterday, and the headline said something to the effect of, if the U.S. economy were a bicycle, it would about to be toppled over. What unadulterated bunk. Now, markets will move around. None of us has any control over that. But I think we really need to look at how we live our lives. Are we going to react to every little nuance in markets or our blood pressure or anything that our children do on a day-to-day basis or our parents or our coworkers? Or do we generally have to just take a step back and take a deep breath and say, this is part of the human experience? So I'm going to give you a couple of great books to read about the human experience. The first one is called Cutting for Stone. It's been on the New York Times bestseller list for a long time. My mom gave it to me about a year ago and said, Glenn, you got to read this. It's about two doctors and two twin boys growing up in Ethiopia. And I said, Mom, I don't want to read something about Ethiopia. I figured, starving children and abject poverty. But the book, which I finished a couple of weeks ago, is so wonderful about how we relate to each other and how we keep an even keel and essentially how to live a life. The other fascinating book that I read is called Big Roads. And I know you'll find this humorous, but it's about the building of the U.S. interstate system. Something, by the way, that Eisenhower really had very little to do with, even though it's called the Eisenhower interstate system. Instead, the road system was developed in the early 1900s as Americans started to buy cars in record numbers and then had no place to drive them. What we forget is all the innovation that's come around, not just in the last 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, but over the last 80 years. The recipe for concrete that we use today all over the world wasn't even perfected until the early 1920s. So getting back to the headline, the U.S. economy is at a record. Over $15.4 trillion in output. The number one manufacturing country in the world by far. And I think what we have to remember is that when economists or the Bureau of Labor Statistics report, the gross domestic product only went up by 0.4%, you have to realize it went up 0.4% from a record. So at $15 trillion, it's 0.4% now bigger. Unemployment, yeah, that's a problem. European debt, yeah, that's a problem. We've seen these problems before. The default by Russia and Thailand and almost South Korea in 1998 took some time to mop up. But you know what? It worked out. What I think we have to realize is that it's not just about the movement of stocks or bonds, but how much income do they pay us? Look at the great companies in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Many of them, like a Procter & Gamble, haven't moved in 10 years. But their dividends have increased by 50 to 100%. We spend dividends, or if you're not retired yet, we reinvest them so that we can buy more things at lower price. So, back to the analogy. If the U.S. economy were a bicycle, it would be going up a big hill. But we've got Lance Armstrong on the bike. And never bet against Lance Armstrong. Don't bet against the U.S. economy. Read a good book, keep the balance, and of course, call us and we'd love to discuss it with you. We look forward to speaking with you again soon.